Gas station attendant pays for an elderly woman's gasoline and gets fired. Hours later, someone knocks on his door with a surprise that changes his perspective. Marshall stood behind the counter of the small gas station, the familiar sounds of the morning routine swirling around him. The soft hum of the pumps, the rustle of snack bags, and the chatter of regular customers filled the air. Each face was known to him, each smile a reminder of the ordinary rhythm of his days. He greeted Mr. Thompson, the cheerful old man who always bought coffee and a donut, and waved at Laura, the busy mother filling her tank while her kids bounced in the back seat. But this morning felt different. As Marshall organized the candy display, he spotted a frail figure shuffling toward him. It was Edith Lark, a frail elderly woman known for her gentle nature. Her soft gray hair framed her face, and her shy smile tugged at his heart. "Good morning, Marshall," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Good morning, Ms. Lark," he replied warmly, leaning forward to catch her eye. "What can I do for you today?" Edith placed her hand on the counter, her fingers trembling slightly. "I need to fill my tank, dear, but I think I might be short on cash." Her eyes dropped to the floor, and in that moment, Marshall felt a wave of vulnerability wash over him. He knew the struggle of making ends meet. He had seen it on the faces of customers before. He quickly rang up her total and glanced at the register. His heart sank when he realized that Edith didn't have enough money. "It's okay, Ms. Lark," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "How much do you have?" She hesitated, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I have $20, but the total is $25. Marshall felt a tug at his conscience. He could see the worry etched on her face, the need for help shining through her shy demeanor. The thought of sending her away without gas felt wrong. He made a quick decision. "I can cover the difference," he said, forcing a smile. "It's on me today." Edith's face brightened, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. "Oh, Marshall, are you sure? I don't want to impose." "It's no imposition at all," he assured her, his heart swelling with warmth. "Just take care of yourself." As he filled her tank, he felt a sense of satisfaction. He enjoyed helping others, and watching Edith's smile grow made it worthwhile. But just as joy flooded in, a dark shadow loomed behind him. Clyde, the strict manager of the gas station, stood with arms crossed, a frown etched deeply on his face. Marshall's stomach twisted. Clyde's disapproval was well known, and the thought of his reaction sent a chill through Marshall. "What do you think you're doing?" Clyde's voice cut through the morning air like a knife. "You can't just give away company money like that." Marshall turned to face him, his heart pounding. "She needed help, Clyde. It was just a few dollars." Clyde stepped closer, his tone sharp. "We have rules for a reason. Your job is to sell gas, not to play charity. You're risking the company's bottom line." Marshall felt a knot in his stomach tighten. He wanted to defend his choice, to explain that kindness mattered more than policies. But as he glanced at Edith, who stood with her hands clasped tightly, he felt the weight of the moment. "I just wanted to help," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. Clyde's eyes narrowed. "You think this is a joke? You're going to regret this." The words hung heavy in the air, and Marshall's heart sank. He had acted on impulse, driven by compassion, but now it felt like a mistake. The warmth he had felt moments before was replaced by a cold dread. Would this act of kindness cost him everything? The morning sun was still rising when Clyde strode into the gas station, his expression set in a deep frown. Marshall was busy stocking the shelves when he sensed the heavy weight of Clyde's presence. The manager's shoes clicked sharply against the floor, signaling trouble. "Marshall," Clyde said, his voice low and filled with anger. "We need to talk." Marshall turned slowly, his heart racing. "Sure, Clyde. What's up?" Clyde stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "I saw what you did for that old woman. You know our policy against giving away anything. You just cost this company money." She needed help," Marshall replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I couldn't just stand by and watch her struggle." Clyde shook his head, his face turning red. It's not about the money, Marshall. It's about the rules. Rules keep this place running. You think kindness pays the bills? It doesn't. Marshall's stomach twisted into knots. He had acted out of compassion, but now it felt like a knife was twisting in his gut. I didn't think it would be a big deal. She was just trying to get home. Clyde crossed his arms, an unyielding wall of authority. Well, it is a big deal. You've put me in a tough spot. I can't let this slide. You're fired. The words hung in the air, heavy and cold. Marshall's heart sank. Fired? Just like that? Just like that, Clyde replied, his voice firm. You need to understand that this is a business. We can't afford to be charitable. As Clyde walked away, Marshall felt a wave of frustration wash over him. He stood frozen for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. Was my kindness really worth losing my job? He whispered to himself, feeling tears prick at the corners of his eyes. He gathered his belongings with shaking hands, the world around him feeling dull and gray. Each step toward the door felt like a step into darkness. The bell above the entrance jingled as he left, and he was met with the harsh light of the day, which only amplified his sense of loss. The walk home was long and painful. With each step, he felt the emptiness of his apartment waiting for him. It was a small space, filled with memories of better days, but today it felt like a prison. The silence echoed around him, reflecting his own feelings of despair. He dropped his bag on the floor and slumped into a chair, staring at the walls that felt like they were closing in. As he sat there, memories of his childhood came flooding back. He thought of his mother, her warm smile, and the lessons she had taught him about kindness. Always help those in need, Marshall, she would say. You never know what someone else is going through. He could almost hear her voice, gentle yet firm. Kindness is like a light in the dark. It doesn't cost anything, but it means everything. But now, sitting alone in his empty apartment, he questioned everything. Was kindness worth it if it led to such pain? Maybe I was foolish, he murmured, tears slipping down his cheeks. Maybe I should have just followed the rules. The sun began to set outside, casting long shadows across the room. Marshall felt lost in those shadows, wrestling with his thoughts. He wanted to believe that his mother's lessons still mattered, but the world seemed so different now. It felt indifferent and cold, where kindness was viewed as a weakness. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. What do I do now? He asked the empty room. No answer came, only the sound of silence. It wrapped around him like a heavy blanket, suffocating yet comforting in its familiarity. Days passed in a blur, and each one felt heavier than the last. Marshall found himself trapped in a cycle of regret and confusion. He had acted out of kindness, yet here he was, alone and without a job. The weight of his decision pressed down on him, and he could only wonder if he would ever find his way back to the light. Hours passed since Marshall had lost his job, and the silence in his apartment felt heavy. He sat on the edge of his couch, staring at the peeling paint on the walls, lost in thoughts of what had just happened. Suddenly, a firm knock on the door pulled him from his reverie. He hesitated for a moment, unsure if he was ready to face anyone. With a deep breath, he opened the door. Standing there was Edith, the frail, elderly woman from the gas station. In her hands, she held a plate of homemade cookies. Her smile was warm and bright, and for a moment, it filled the empty space around him. "Marshall," Edith exclaimed, her voice cheerful. "I came to deliver some cookies. I hope you like chocolate chip." Marshall couldn't help but smile back, even in his state of despair. "Thank you, Edith. That's very kind of you." As he stepped aside to let her in, he felt a mix of gratitude and sadness. "I appreciate it, really. But you didn't have to come all this way, especially after, well, you know." "I did," she said, her eyes twinkling. "I heard what happened. I felt it was my duty to check on you. You showed me such kindness, and I want to return the favor." Marshall sighed and sat down at the small kitchen table. It just feels like such a mess. I tried to do something nice, and now I lost my job for it." Edith took a seat across from him, her expression turning serious. "Sometimes, doing the right thing comes with a cost. But remember, kindness is never wasted. It may lead to something better." He looked at her, curious. "How do you know that?" "Well," she began, her voice softening. "I used to be a lawyer. I spent years helping people find justice. It was not always easy, but it was worth it. I learned that when you help others, the universe often finds a way to help you back." Marshall's interest piqued. "You were a lawyer? That's impressive. What made you stop?" Edith chuckled lightly. "Life has a funny way of changing our paths. I retired years ago, but I still want to help where I can. And right now, I want to help you find a new job." "Really?" Marshall asked, a flicker of hope igniting within him. "You'd do that for me?" "Of course," Edith replied, her eyes shining. "I have connections in the community. I can reach out to some organizations that could use someone like you." He felt a surge of gratitude. "I don't even know what to say. Thank you, Edith. This means so much to me." As they shared the cookies, the atmosphere lightened. They began to exchange stories. Edith spoke about her past cases, while Marshall shared memories from his childhood. Laughter filled the small kitchen, and for the first time since his firing, he felt a sense of warmth and connection. "You know, I used to have a neighbor just like you," Edith shared with a smile. "He always helped others, even when he had little to give. It inspired me to do the same." "I wish I had known him," Marshall said. "He sounds like a great person." "He was," Edith replied, "but kindness doesn't have to be grand. Even small gestures can create ripples in someone's life." Marshall nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I want to remember that. I want to make a difference too." Edith leaned in closer, her voice filled with encouragement. "And you will. Just take it one step at a time. Let's start by getting you that interview." As they finished the cookies, Marshall felt a new sense of purpose. The bond between him and Edith was forming, strong and genuine. In that moment, he understood that even in his darkest times, kindness could light the way forward. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting warm light through the kitchen window, Edith sat at her small table, a determined look on her face. She had made it her mission to help Marshall after hearing about his job loss. With a few phone calls, she hoped to use her connections to make a difference in his life. "Today is the day," she whispered to herself, grabbing her notebook. Edith had written down the names of people she knew who worked in community organizations. She took a deep breath and began dialing, her fingers trembling slightly with excitement and resolve. Meanwhile, Marshall paced in his living room, the echoes of his earlier despair still fresh in his mind. He felt a mix of anxiety and hope about the possibility of a new job. The weight of the past few days hung heavily on his shoulders. Just then, a knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Marshall, it's me, Edith," a cheerful voice called from outside. He opened the door, and her bright smile warmed his heart. "Edith, what a surprise!" He stepped aside to let her in. "I have great news," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "I used my connections to get you an interview at the Helping Hands community organization." Marshall's heart raced. "Really? That's amazing. But what if I mess it up? I haven't been in a job interview for so long." "Don't worry," Edith said, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Just be yourself. You have so much to offer. Remember, you have already shown kindness and compassion. That is what they will see." He smiled, her faith in him lifting some of the weight from his heart. "Thank you, Edith. I don't know what I would do without you." As the day of the interview approached, Marshall found himself increasingly nervous. He paced back and forth, rehearsing his answers in front of the mirror. "What if they don't like me?" he muttered to himself, anxiety creeping back in. "Marshall," Edith called from the other room, where she had come to help him prepare. "Stop worrying. Just think about why you want to help others. You have a story to tell." Taking a deep breath, Marshall nodded. "You're right. I want to make a difference. I want to help people like you helped me." He felt a small spark of motivation igniting within him. On the day of the interview, Edith accompanied him, her presence providing much-needed support. As they arrived at the community organization, Marshall looked around at the bustling activity. People were engaged in various projects, and the atmosphere buzzed with energy. "See, this place is alive with purpose," Edith said, smiling at him. "You belong here." As Marshall walked into the interview room, his heart pounded in his chest. The panel looked friendly, and he felt a sense of calm wash over him. He remembered Edith's words and focused on sharing his story. "Why do you want to work here?" one of the interviewers asked. "I believe in kindness," Marshall replied, his voice steady. "I've seen how small acts can change lives. I want to be part of that change." After what felt like hours, the interview concluded. Marshall left the building, his nerves still tingling, but a sense of relief filled him. He found Edith waiting outside, her face bright with anticipation. "How did it go?" she asked eagerly. "I think it went well, but I'm not sure," he admitted. "I just hope I made the right impression." A few days later, as Marshall sat on the couch, the phone rang. He answered, and the voice on the other end was cheerful. "Is this Marshall? We are pleased to offer you the position." Overwhelmed with emotion, Marshall felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. Thank you so much," he stammered. When he hung up the phone, he turned to Edith, who had been watching with hopeful eyes. "I got the job. I really got it." Edith rushed over, wrapping her arms around him. "I knew you could do it. This is just the beginning, Marshall. You are going to make a real difference." As they celebrated together, Marshall felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. He realized how much Edith's support had meant to him. Their friendship had grown through their shared experiences, and now they had a common purpose. "Thank you for everything, Edith," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I couldn't have done this without you." With a warm smile, Edith replied, "And I couldn't be prouder of you. Let's go make a difference together." Marshall stood outside the community organization on a bright Monday morning, the sun warming his face. Today marked the first day of his new job. He took a deep breath, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. As he pushed open the door, a small bell jingled above him, signaling his arrival. The office buzzed with activity. People were moving about, answering phones and chatting with one another. Marshall felt a wave of warmth wash over him. This was different from the gas station, where the air often felt heavy with routine. Here, he could sense a purpose in the air. "Hey there! You must be Marshall," a cheerful voice called out. A woman with curly hair and a bright smile approached him. "I'm Lisa, the team leader. Welcome aboard." "Thank you. I'm excited to be here," Marshall replied, his voice steadying as he met her friendly gaze. As the day unfolded, Marshall faced many new tasks. He was tasked with organizing a food drive for the local shelter. At first, he felt overwhelmed. "I'm not sure where to start," he admitted to Lisa during their lunch break. "Just take it one step at a time," she encouraged. "We're all here to help each other. You'll get the hang of it." Marshall nodded, taking her words to heart. He realized that he was not alone in this new journey. Each small success he achieved felt like a victory. As he interacted with the community members who came in to volunteer, he felt a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced before. Days turned into weeks, and Marshall began to notice something beautiful. A community was forming around him. Volunteers from all walks of life came together, each with their own stories and reasons for helping. One afternoon, while sorting through food donations with a group of volunteers, he struck up a conversation with an elderly man named Harold. "You know," Harold said, his hands busy with cans of soup, "I used to be just like you, feeling lost after losing my job. But helping others gave me a new purpose." "I can relate to that," Marshall replied, a smile breaking across his face. "It's amazing how being here makes me feel like I'm part of something bigger." "Exactly," Harold beamed. "Kindness has a way of bringing people together. You'll see." As the weeks passed, Marshall felt a growing desire to give back. Inspired by the kindness he received from Edith, he decided to volunteer at the shelter on weekends. During one of his shifts, he met a young woman named Sarah, who was struggling to find her footing after losing her job. "It's tough out there," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. "I'm not sure how to move forward." Marshall listened intently, remembering his own struggles. "I know how you feel. It's hard, but it does get better. Let me help you with your resume. We can work on it together." Sarah looked at him, hope flickering in her eyes. "Really? That would mean a lot." "Of course, we can meet here on Saturday," he replied, feeling a sense of purpose wash over him. As Marshall continued to volunteer and mentor others, he kept in touch with Edith. They often met for coffee, discussing their shared projects and how to reach more people in need. One afternoon, while sitting in their favorite cafe, Edith expressed her pride in Marshall's growth. "You've come so far, Marshall," she said, her eyes sparkling with warmth. "I always knew you had it in you." "Thank you, Edith," he replied, feeling a swell of gratitude. "I wouldn't be here without your support." Their friendship deepened, rooted in the values they both cherished. Together, they organized community events, spreading kindness and support to those around them. Marshall began to realize that each act of kindness, no matter how small, created a ripple effect that could change lives. As he watched people come together, sharing laughter and stories, he felt a sense of belonging he had longed for. Marshall understood that he was now part of a community where kindness thrived, and he knew he would do everything he could to pay it forward. The sun shone brightly over the community center, casting a warm glow on the gathering crowd. Marshall stood at the edge, taking in the festive atmosphere. Colorful banners decorated the walls, and laughter filled the air as families and friends came together to celebrate the organization's achievements. He felt a mix of pride and nervousness. Today marked a special moment in his life, a culmination of everything he had worked for since his unexpected journey began. "Look at all these people," Edith said, joining him with a plate of cookies in hand. Her eyes sparkled with happiness. "Can you believe how far we've come?" Marshall smiled, feeling the warmth of her presence. "It's amazing, Edith. It feels like just yesterday I was at that gas station, unsure of what would happen next." Edith nodded knowingly. "You took a chance, Marshall. That one act of kindness changed everything." She gestured toward the crowd. "And now, look at how many lives you've touched." As the event began, the director of the organization took the stage to speak. "Today, we celebrate our work, but more importantly, we celebrate the people who make it possible. Marshall and Edith have shown us the true meaning of compassion and connection." The crowd erupted in applause, and Marshall felt a wave of emotion wash over him. "Thanks to you, we have enough funds to expand our outreach programs," the director continued. "Your kindness has inspired so many others to give back." Marshall glanced at Edith, who beamed with pride. "I never imagined this would happen," he whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. "Neither did I," she replied, squeezing his hand. "But look around you. This is the power of kindness." When their names were called, Marshall and Edith walked up to the stage, hand in hand. The audience cheered, and Marshall felt his heart race. He took a deep breath, preparing to speak. Thank you all for this honor," he began, his voice slightly shaky. "I never thought I would be standing here. A few months ago, I was lost and unsure. But Edith showed me that one small act of kindness could change everything." He looked over at Edith, who nodded encouragingly. "I remember the moment I met you, Marshall. You showed me that compassion is a powerful force. It can heal wounds we never knew we had." Tears shimmered in Edith's eyes, and Marshall continued. "Together, we have created something beautiful. We've helped people who need it most, and I am so grateful to have you by my side." As they left the stage, the applause echoed in Marshall's ears. He felt lighter than he had in a long time, as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. Once they were back in the crowd, Edith turned to him with a smile. "This is just the beginning, you know," she said. "There's so much more we can do together." "I can't wait," Marshall replied, feeling a surge of excitement. "I want to keep helping others, just like you helped me." Kindness is like a ripple. Edith said thoughtfully. When you throw a stone into a pond, the ripples expand. Your kindness will inspire others, and it will keep spreading. Marshall nodded in agreement. I've learned that giving is just as rewarding as receiving. It feels good to make a difference. Later, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Marshall and Edith found a quiet spot to sit. They watched families enjoying the festivities, children laughing and playing games. Do you remember when we first met? Marshall asked, a smile on his face. I was just a guy working at a gas station, and you were a stranger needing help. Edith chuckled softly. And now, look at us. We've built a community of support and love. I am so proud of what we've accomplished. Marshall took a moment to reflect, realizing how much his life had changed. I used to think kindness was just a nice thing to do. Now, I see it as something that enriches our lives and the lives of those around us. Exactly, Edith replied, her voice filled with warmth. You've learned the true value of kindness, and it will always be a part of you. As the night deepened, Marshall felt a profound sense of gratitude. He knew that their journey was far from over, but he was ready to face whatever came next, with Edith by his side. Together, they would continue to spread kindness and make a lasting impact on their community. Share this story if you believe that kindness can transform lives and create powerful connections. Leave a comment about a moment when a small act of kindness made a difference in your life, and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one.